Today, like I said, we're going to try to keep this under an hour. I want to make sure you guys have pen and paper for any prompts. We're going to have 5 prompts today that I'm going to give you guys a few minutes to answer, just to help deepen your learning and talk about anything that is in this presentation and apply it to your unique situation. If you have any questions throughout this, you're welcome to put them in the chat or raise your hand. Otherwise, I do have time for a Q&A at the end. All right, so you're in the right place today. If you are overeating, binge eating, or both, so I'm calling this Create Your Binge-Free Brain in 2023, but it really applies to any type of problem that involves eating too much food. Ultimately, they're both still a habit that we're going to be dealing with. So they can apply to both. If you are frustrated with not knowing how to stop eating, this was a big thing for me, asking the question, like, why can't I just stop at 1? How do I stop at just 1? If you get strong urges to eat and feel like you have no willpower, that's going to be our main topic of today, is how to deal with these urges. This is also kind of known as like cravings, when you just feel like they're so strong, they're just overcoming. That is what we're going to be talking about. So the problem we are dealing with is, why can't I just eat normally? This is a question that came up for me a ton during my journey because I felt out of control around food. I just thought I was being crazy. I thought maybe there's something wrong with me. Maybe there's something that's broken. All of these questions kind of come up, and you probably know that there's nothing wrong with you, but you see other people eating normally or eating amounts of food that you would like to be eating, and you're wondering, why can't I just do that too? The reason this is because you don't know your urges. So you don't know what they are, you don't know where they came from, you don't know how to get rid of them, or strategies to handle them. So these are all the things I'm going to be teaching you today. So for those of you who do not know me, my name is Amber Avila. I'm a binge eating and overeating coach who helps people feel normal and in control around food. I'm here today after struggling with a lot of my own issues. So I was on both ends of the spectrum. I did calorie counting, food rules, restriction, and then I also went to the other side that had out of control binge eating, overeating, and kind of dealt with everything in between. So I have been, like I said, on both ends of the spectrum, but I really love helping people stop overeating and binge eating, because I think that there are people on both sides, but it's fun to talk about how we can heal our relationship with food from that perspective. I ended up getting years of coaching to help me get out of it, and I fell in love with coaching so much that I ended up becoming a coach and getting trained by my coach so I could help other people get out of the same food issues that I did. I live just outside of Denver, Colorado. I love to travel. This is me in Barcelona, Spain, with a nice Aperol Spritz and a beautiful church behind me. I go to lots of concerts and festivals. I ski, even though I am not a big fan of the cold. And I go through a lot more candles than I do jars of Nutella now. Kind of cheesy, but I think it's so true. I love candles. I'm always lighting them at work. So we're going to start by defining urges. So what is an urge? I describe it as this feeling of over desire, usually to do a habit that you don't want to be doing. So you can get urges for all types of things. Like, for example, you get the urge to brush your teeth in the morning, and this is like a positive urge, and it's usually not as compelling as this urge to eat. And that's why I say it's this feeling of over desire. It's not just this normal amount of, oh yeah, a cookie sounds good. It is this feeling that is urgent. That's why we call them urges. They feel like I need to do them now. It feels impulsive, powerful, all-consuming. So you might describe it as you feel like a zombie has taken over you, and you're just walking into the kitchen all of a sudden, you're in the cabinets, you're eating the food, and you don't really know what's happened. That is because of the urge. That is that feeling that is coming up. You might also call it a craving, but it's this very strong craving and this over desire to eat a lot of food. So why do you have urges? Initially, you probably had some form of restriction. So at some point in your journey, there was probably a diet, or you're counting calories, or you had food rules. There was some form of restriction that came into place. And when that happened, you got an urge to eat. Why this happens is because we still have the same brains that we had, the past few thousand years. They haven't really evolved that much. So when our brain senses restriction, it sends out urges to eat to help us survive. This is something that is very helpful for us, especially in caveman days, because if there was a famine that was about to come, we would want to get in as much food as possible in order to aid our survival. So the same thing happens in the modern world when you do a juice cleanse. All of a sudden, your brain thinks you're going to die. There's not enough food around. Something bad is going to happen. And so it wants you to eat all the food right now in order to help you survive. So it's coming from a good place, but you get these urges to eat and then you act on them. So right now, and especially in the beginning, every time you have this urge to overeat or binge, you don't really have any strategies or tools. You're not really sure what's happening. So then you act on it, which is totally normal. But then once you act on it, your brain gets this reward. Food is really pleasurable for our brains, and it gives it a big hit of dopamine. And so when it gets this reward, it thinks this is something good. This is something you want to be doing. And so it creates a habit around it. And then the more we do this, the more this brain pathway gets ingrained. So after we act, after our brain gets this reward, we might think that, then we go into we're broken. Oh, there's something wrong with us. We're now overly full. We're frustrated. We're confused. You're blaming yourself. You're telling yourself you're going to do better next time, but you keep going into it. And the more you go into it, the more this pathway gets ingrained. So it's not your fault. You're not broken. This is actually a sign of a fully functioning brain, because habits are our way to save energy and not have to think about everything we do all the time. So your brain is just trying to conserve energy, make it useful, and say, okay, let's just give you these urges. Let's make this pathway easy. But of course, we're in the modern world, and this isn't a helpful habit to have. So we don't want to keep it. Now, I also want to say that if you can stop restricting, that's a big part of it, but you might still be caught in this habit loop. And that's where a lot of people get stuck, is they see on Instagram people saying, well, just stop restricting, just eat more food. And they do that, but they keep binge eating or overeating. And that's because they've gotten caught in this habit loop. So we can take away that whole restriction part, and chances are we might still get into this pattern of having the urge and acting and reward, even without the restriction being there. So the first prompt I have for you guys is helping you understand where this habit came from. So we want to look at this so we can kind of get some clarity on where this came from. So I want you to take a few minutes to write about, when did your overeating or binge eating habits start? And then also thinking about, how is it helping you then? Because we often forget to have compassion for ourselves, that our brain was just trying to help us in that moment. It wasn't trying to sabotage our healthy eating goals. It was just trying to protect us from a possible famine coming. So I'm going to give you guys a minute or two to write about this, and then I have one more prompt coming up. Okay, so I'm going to go on to the next one. The second part of this is reflecting. So I want you to think about, how is this habit no longer serving you? How is it no longer helping you? What are the negative effects of it? Because now that we've identified, okay, there was a part in my life where maybe this was trying to protect me, chances are it's not helping you so much anymore. And so you want to get really clear on what those reasons are, so you know why you want to change this. So let's talk about maybe what you have tried for this. The first thing you might have tried is willpower. So this is a very common approach, and none of these approaches are bad, but they're just not always helpful. So willpower is white knuckling our way through, trying to just like hold on tight. We're not giving in. We're not going to make it happen. And, there's nothing wrong with like being super committed to your goals. But the problem with willpower is it takes a lot of effort and energy. And chances are the later on the day it goes, the harder willpower is. So you might notice that like in the morning, if you get this desire to eat a lot of food, you're able to like get through it. And that's probably because you're using willpower. But then at the end of the day, when you're tired, you've already used up your willpower, you don't have as much energy, you're not going to be able to resist that urge, and it's going to feel really hard if you do. So you're fighting it, it's making it bigger, it's just feeling really hard. You might make it through, but ultimately most of the time you end up giving into it with willpower because it just feels too difficult. Then you might have tried getting rid of your binge foods. This is a super common approach and what a lot of people recommend, and it makes total sense like on the surface. If you're eating a lot of this food, just get rid of it, or just, if you don't have it in the house, how are you going to eat it? And this might work for a little bit. You might think, okay, get it out of the house, I'm not eating it. But then all of a sudden you're binging on peanut butter. Okay, and then you get rid of your peanut butter and now you're binge eating on the almonds. So now you take away peanut butter and almonds, but now you figure out some concoction with the flour and sugar in your cabinet. So it's like, yes, you can make it easier for yourself sometimes, but if you have this really strong habit, you'll probably notice yourself just finding something else in those moments when you get a really strong urge and just getting really creative with the things you binge on. Like one of my things used to be protein bars because, it's like they're healthy and then, they're really not that bad for you. But ultimately, if you eat 3 or 4 of them, you're not going to be doing so hot. So, it might work initially, but then also you think about there's going to be birthday parties and there's going to be bridal showers and there's going to be baby showers. And then you're going to have some big event out in the town and there's going to be cookies there or whatever. Like you're going to run into these foods again at some point. And if you've never interacted with them in a normal manner, then all of a sudden you get to the party and you want to just eat all of them all at once because this isn't a food I normally get. I'm not allowed to have this. I'm going to be good tomorrow. And so then in these situations, you end up binge eating anyways. So we need to learn how to eat these foods in moderation, which can feel scary, but we're never going to learn how to do it unless we practice. So it's actually important to have at least some food that's enjoyable in our home. All right, you might have also tried bubble baths, going for a walk, calling a friend, brushing your teeth. All the things Google suggests you do when you are binge eating. All great things to do. I love bubble baths. I've been taking a lot of them recently. And all of these things might be helpful again for a little bit, but chances are you might go for a walk and then you get back and you still want to eat. Right? Like it might have like calmed you down a little, but you might still have this urge because you never actually handled the urge. So again, all of these things might work, but the problem is that none of these address your brain. We need to specifically look at how to handle your urges and how to manage your thoughts and feelings around food, because those are ultimately the cause of your binge eating. It's not stress, it's not boredom, it's not taking enough walks, which is the reason why you're binge eating. It's because you have these urges and you have certain thoughts and feelings around food that are different than people who don't have these urges and thoughts and feelings around food. So yes, if you are stressed, if you are bored, if you haven't gone for walks in days, you might feel a little bit more under the weather and it might be harder to deal with the urges. But ultimately, we know that these are not the causes of your binge eating because there are plenty of people in the world who are stressed out every day, who are bored every day, who are anxious every day, and they don't binge because they don't have these urges. So that's what we need to focus on. We need to focus on not just putting on the Band-Aid solution, but going deeper within our brain. So what is the solution then? It is twofold. The first part is we need to not restrict. So when we restrict, we get these biological urges, and biological urges are really hard to overcome because they are biological, simply because like our brain is using them to help us survive. So if we are in this like extreme restriction, really low calories, tons of food rules, that type of thing, that is going to make it so much harder not to go into this process. So the first step is always not restricting. And we're not going to talk about that a ton today, but just to define restriction in general, how I like to talk about it is restriction is if you are one, consistently ignoring your hunger. So hunger is a normal natural signal that we all get every day. But if you're ignoring hunger for hours on end in the name of weight loss or skipping meals, even when you're hungry, then that is restriction. And restriction is also if you never give yourself any food pleasure. So if you are never enjoying your food, if you never give yourself treats, then you're going to feel deprived, and that's going to be a form of restriction. So first part, stop restricting. And then the second part is not acting. So this is basically when the urge comes up, we don't want to act on it, because if we don't act on it, we're not going to give our brain that food reward. And if we don't get that food reward, our brain is going to learn to stop creating this habit and stop giving us the urge to eat. What I want you to notice is that we're not trying to get rid of the urges to eat. Getting rid of the urges to eat is really hard to do just like on our own. We can change our brain so it stops giving us the urges to eat. But that's like saying, don't think of a pink elephant, and then all of a sudden we're thinking of a pink elephant. Like, you can't really control the nature of your thoughts that much. You can only control how you respond to them. Another example of this is if you have the thought when you are super angry at someone and you want to punch them. Sometimes you can't control that thought comes up. Sometimes it just comes up and you're like, oh, that's a silly thought. And you don't act on it. You decide, oh, I'm not going to, actually follow that thought. But sometimes we just have these thoughts come up and we just aren't in charge of that. So we don't want to try to like fight off getting the urges to eat. We want to expect that the urge to eat is going to come up and then not act on it. Now, I'm sure you're thinking that's great, but how do I just not act on an urge, right? Like, so simple. If you want to stop binge eating, just stop binge eating. But I'm going to tell you how you do this. So the first part is accepting the urge. So this is acknowledging that the urge is there without resisting or fighting it. So most people, when the urge comes up, they immediately go into this shouldn't be here. I can't believe this is happening. I don't want this to be here. And that is not acceptance. That is resisting and fighting it. Accepting it looks like, okay, I see that this urge is coming up for me, and that's okay. It's happening. Because if we resist it, then we're resisting the reality of what's happening. The reality is the urge is here. And if we decide we don't want it to be there, too bad, it's here. And if we're resisting with reality, we're only going to lose 100% of the time. So accepting that it's there, right? Acknowledging it. Okay, urge is here. Let's do this. Then we are going to decide from our highest self that you are not going to eat in this moment. We have two parts of our brain. Now, I know we have a lot of parts of our brain, but for simplicity purposes today, we have two parts of our brain. We're going to have this lower part of our brain that is the habitual automatic part of our brain that just sends out urges and suggestions and habits and wants us to survive. And then we have this higher part of our brain that is the logical part of ourself that can plan, that can visualize our future, that has goals for ourselves. And so we want to make this decision from the highest part of our brain. Because what's going to happen is you get into the urge, you're like, all right, I'm going to accept it, I'm acknowledging it. And then we tend to play ping pong with our two parts of our brain, where our lower brain says, just eat it, I don't care, this isn't important. And then your higher brain says, no, I don't want to binge. This is my goal is to overcome this and recover. And you're going back and forth between these two parts of your brain, which only makes it harder. We need to decide to set the ping pong ball down and the paddle down and walk away, and we're not going to do it, right? We don't need to argue with that lower part of our brain because it's not a logical part. It doesn't have decision-making and rational abilities within it. So there's no need to argue with it. We just need to drop the argument and decide we are not going to eat this in this moment because of XYZ. You can list your reasons. These are all my reasons that I have that I know from my highest self I don't want to do. And you also know that binge eating is never something you actually want to do, because never after a binge have you sat there and thought, wow, I'm so glad I did that, right? You always regret it because After you follow the urge, then your higher brain comes back in charge and was like, why the heck did you do that? Right? This is not what we wanted to do. So that's how we know we don't actually want to do it, is because we never like doing it afterwards. Then the third step is to let go. So now that we've kind of paid attention to it a little, we've looked at it, we know that it's there, we've thought about it some, we've decided not to act on it, we need to stop paying attention to it because we've already made the decision. We're not acting on it. If we pay attention to it, it's just like going further into the argument, right? Just like if like a toddler was wanting something and it's like, I really want this toy. And you're like, you talked about it and you told them why we're not getting that toy today. You're not going to keep talking to them. You're just going to ignore them. You told them your reasons. We're not getting the toy today. It's just how it is. So we need to stop paying attention to it and allow it to pass through us and move on with our day. So you can either do what you were doing before. So if you were working, just keep working. You can do something new. If you're done working, go make dinner, go on to a new activity. I guess you're probably not making dinner if you're having an urge, but whatever you're doing, you can either like do what you're doing before, move on to a new activity, but we just want to stop paying attention to it, and allowing it to pass through us is really important because most of us act on the urge so quickly, we don't even give it the opportunity to go through us and go away. So we need to give it time because the truth is urges are just this feeling of over desire, and we have never felt any feeling forever in our entire life. All feelings eventually move through us and pass through us, and then a new one comes in and then that passes. And that's just the nature of thoughts and emotions, as they come and go. None of them stay forever. And so urges are the same way. I have lots of examples for this, but one of my favorite ones is thinking about a cloud in the sky. So let's say it's a clear day and you look up, you see a cloud in the sky and you say, oh, look, it's a cloud. How interesting. And then you move along with your day. And then you look up 15 minutes later and that cloud is gone. Same thing with urges. You want to look up at the urge and say, oh, look, an urge. How interesting. Right? And then you're just going to move on with the rest of your day. And when you check back in, chances are that urge is going to be gone. Without the drama, without going into it, just letting it do its thing and pass across the sky. Okay, so we have another 2 prompts coming. So this first one, knowing your urges. So we want to know when our urges show up and if there's any certain patterns. Because if we can identify patterns to our urges, we can make them feel more predictable. One of the biggest reasons it's hard for us to deal with urges is because we get so surprised and frustrated when they show up. So if we can learn when our urges tend to show up and what they feel like, it's going to be easier to stay calm and in control around them and actually do what we want to do. So I'll give you guys a minute or 2 for this before we go on to the next one. Okay, and then the next prompt, we want to identify our urges. So you want to think about, what do your urges feel like to you? What do they say and sound like in your mind? If we know how it feels in our body and like what thoughts are around it, we can identify it so we can recognize that this is an urge, and then we can move forward with the process of accepting it, deciding to feel it, and letting it go. Right? If we can't even identify that it's an urge, it's going to be really hard to figure out what to do next. So you want to get really clear on like what an urge feels like to you, so you know when it's happening. Okay. So we are going to talk about the new pathway. So we have this old pathway that we just went over about what you are doing right now and how those urges are happening. But we want to talk about where we are going to go instead. So what's going to happen is we are still going to have these urges to eat. So we talked about, we're not going to try to make them go away initially. The urges to eat are going to come up. We're going to expect them. Then we're going to go into the process of accepting, deciding, and letting them go. When we do that, it is really important to celebrate ourselves and get excited about doing that process, because that is going to give our brain this new reward that is going to help us want to take this pathway. Our brain loves positive emotions. And so if we can feel really excited, really proud, really happy when we do this process and don't act on the urge, it's going to be a lot more likely that we're going to want to repeat it in the future. Versus what most people do is like they get through it, maybe you're white knuckling through it, you're like, all right, thank God I made it through, and then you move on with your day. Versus acknowledging what you just did and how important it is that you just did that, you didn't act on the urge, and then you celebrate it and you're like, wow, go me. That was so awesome that I was able to do that. And you get really, really excited about it. And then you will remember it for the next time it comes up. Strong emotions also strengthen our memory in our brain. So if you think back to when you were a kid, a lot of times the things that you remember have strong emotions attached to it. So if your parents got divorced, you probably had a lot of big emotions around that. And so you remember that. Or you went to Disneyland and you had a lot of strong emotions around that. So you remember going to Disneyland. Same thing here. We want to get really excited so our brain remembers this pathway and wants to repeat it for the future. So as we go forward with this process and we repeat this, we accept, decide, let go, we celebrate, our brain gets this reward, woohoo, we did it, go me. Over time, the urges to eat are going to fade away. So ultimately, the less you act on these urges, the weaker they become, because your brain is learning that this is the new pathway you want to take. And when you're not acting on that old pathway, it's going to prune it away. You're not doing it. It's just like using your muscles. Like when you use them a lot, your body learns that this is something you want it to be strong at, versus if you never use those muscles, it's not going to put any effort into maintaining them. So this is ultimately how you rewire your brain and create your binge-free brain. So we have one last prompt. This is going to be about creating your 2023 vision. So this is called Create Your Binge-Free Brain in 2023. Of course, it applies all year. But I want you to think about, we're only a few weeks into 2023. What would your 2023 be without binge eating? What would that look like? Get really clear on it, because if we have this vision of what our life will look like without this habit, it is easier to get excited about that and want to go into this new pathway, because ultimately it's going to take effort to change from acting on the urge to not acting on it. Like it does take some effort. It can be a little bit uncomfortable, but if we're really clear about all the positive benefits we'll get from this and all the amazing ways our life will change, it will make it easier to do. So you could think about how you might be feeling, how your eating habits might be different. maybe how your relationships would improve, or your work life or school life could improve because you have more brain space and focus for it. All right. So if you would like to guarantee that this vision will come true this year for you, I would love to invite you into my one-on-one coaching program. It's called the Confident Eater Program. I know, super original. It's just my name, Confident Eater. And it's 6 months of personalized coaching that is going to help you stop overeating and binge eating for good. So today we talked about what I call the stress-free urge solution. So I taught you today how you can manage your urges in a way that feels calmer and more collected, in a way that will actually change your brain and rewire it. But that is just a very small fraction of what we go over in my program. So I talk about something I call the thought breakdown method, and this is going to help you understand the root cause of why you're eating too much food and how to manage your thoughts and emotions, which is a super important tool, not only for your eating, but also for the rest of your life. I teach you how to neutralize food. So I have a signature process to do this. And this is going to help you stop obsessing over certain foods, the ones that you binge on, the ones that you overeat on, the one that you think about all day, and help you feel in control and peace around them. We talk about hunger and fullness. So this is using your own body's signals to guide you as a natural eater. So not using calorie counts or meal plans, using what your own natural calorie counter that's built in is saying and telling you. We work on confidence. So of course, this is the Confident Eater program. So not only are you becoming a confident eater, but we are going to work on your body confidence and showing up as your highest best self in all areas of life. And then one of my favorite pillars is maintaining progress. So what tends to happen is we have this identity shift that happens as we've been someone has been a binge eater for a while, or we've been someone who's been an overeater for a while, or we've struggled with food for a while, and it can feel difficult for us to step into a new identity of someone who's a normal eater, who's a natural eater, who doesn't struggle with food. So I help you make that shift in your identity so it feels like this is the new you and you can maintain that progress. How it works is you get 1 hour video calls. So this is where we celebrate, of course, super important. I help you celebrate so we strengthen those new brain pathways. We learn together. I coach you. We really become a strong team so we can tackle and solve these eating issues from a brain-based psychological perspective. You're going to get unlimited text and voice message support. Yes, it is seriously unlimited. You can message me anytime. I am here to hold your hand every single step of the way on your journey. I want you to be successful, so I'm here to support you. Then you also get customized lessons and worksheets. So I don't shove you into some generic one-size-fits-all course. You're working with me one-on-one, so you really get evaluated on your unique wants and needs, and every week we can adjust your plan a little so it really fits towards what your unique struggles are. So if you are interested, your next step are to click the link I don't have the chat box up, so I'm going to show you there is a QR code on the next slide instead that we will get to. And then you can set up a consultation call with me. It's free, about 45 minutes. This is to help you get to know the program a little deeper, and I make sure it's a good fit for you. We're a good match. I can get you to your goals. And then you begin your confident eater journey so you can be binge-free, overeating free, whatever your healthy eating goals are, we get you there. So that is the end of the content tonight. If you guys have any questions, feel free to raise your hand or put them in the chat. That QR code you can use to sign up for a consultation call with me. Otherwise, there is all my other info there that you're welcome to message me on, or anything you need. Yeah, Bailey, go ahead and mute.
Hey, so I was wondering, first I wanted to say I've worked with Amber before, and I'm still working on myself, but she's really helped me so much. And at first, I didn't know if this is something I wanted to do, and it just honestly changed my life and my mindset. So first, I just wanted to say that. But I was also wondering, Amber, if you could explain kind of um, how with urges, how we accept where we're at while also trying to, change and get better without being too hard on ourselves.
Yeah. Well, thank you first for saying that. I love you and you're my favorite. All of my clients are my favorite, but I, I really love our time together. But yeah,
Thanks.
so, when we get into this place, what happens, we start to see some excess with handling our urges, and we get really excited, all right, we're doing this. And then all of a sudden we have a slip up, and then all the drama comes back, and then we get really frustrated when the urges come up, and we forget to do everything we were just doing right. And we go back into the willpower and the frustration and the struggling and anger around urges. And so I think the first part is just accepting that if we have some slip ups, if we go into old pathways, that's all that's happened, is we're going into old pathways, right? Because just because we do this a few times doesn't mean automatically we're never going to do it again. And these patterns are never going to come up. They come up. And for maybe some reason that day, you were a little more tired or something happened and you were a little stressed and you're having a little bit more difficulty accessing that higher part of your brain. And so you go into old habit pathway. And so first, I think it's taking out the drama and not making those slips mean anything about you. Just being oh, that was just me. My brain was reminded of something I used to do. This is part of my past. So sometimes it comes up. And even with me today, sometimes there will be a situation where all of a sudden I get this really strong urge and I'm just whoa, what is this? And it's just because my brain was being reminded of the pathway. So whenever I used to come home, when I was living in my apartment and I would come home, I would oftentimes get these really strong urges, but it just reminded me of the times that I binged when I was at home. And if you make it a big problem and you're oh my gosh, I can't believe I'm getting this urge, I'm really frustrated, then that's not going into acceptance mode, that's going into fighting with the urge mode. And then it makes it grow and gets bigger and harder to deal with. And then we probably don't deal with it so much. So, just accepting that sometimes we have slip ups, sometimes we go back into old habits, and that's okay. But that doesn't mean we're all of a sudden incapable of handling these urges. We still always have this power within us. We've done it before, and I know you definitely have done it before. And so it is 100% within your ability. And it's just getting back to that the next time you can without the drama. Does that answer it? If it doesn't, let me know.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah. So I know sometimes, it's hard this kind of goes with the topic of accepting where we are in our bodies, weight wise, and wanting to change. We can have them both there, but you need that acceptance piece, because if you don't accept your body and you hate it the whole time, you need to think about how you treat something you hate. And it's probably not very good, versus how you treat something you love and accept. like your dog probably, or, whatever animals you have, like you love and accept them unconditionally and you treat them really well. Like you want to feed them and water them and give them walks and, give them the best care and fancy toys and, all the expensive treats because you love them. Right. But you also keep them healthy, right? You you want to make sure you're not giving them too many treats because that's not good for them. And because you love them, you want them to be healthy. And so it's the same thing for us. We need to be coming from this place of love for ourselves always, and not from this place of shame and self-hatred, because we always treat things better that we love. And then we can go into actually making those changes then because we love ourselves. It's so much easier to go into that and actually stay consistent with it. Anything else? All right. Well, I will end it there then. Oops. If you want to have a consultation, like I said, you can scan the QR code. Otherwise, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me, send me a message on Instagram. I just got my website up, so you can see more details about working with me there as well. And you'll find a link for a consultation call there as well. So thank you all for coming today. I so appreciate you being here. I hope you all got something to take with you moving forward and found it informative. I will be sending out the replay too to everyone over email. So if you want to watch it back, it will be there too. So thank you guys so much and have a amazing rest of your night.
Thanks, Amber.
Thank you.